and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you for bringing us here safely, and thank you for all the blessings of your creation, and ask you to guide us as we do the people's business this evening. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Our first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda, including possible agenda additions. If I can have the floor computer, please. We have one additional item for your consideration this evening. This is a staff presentation, and this is an approval to extend economic development incentives that are in an agreement between the EDA and the Knife Center, LLC. That's the only additional item this evening for consideration.
Is there a motion on the agenda? So moved. If there's no discussion, we can vote.
Six yes, with Mr. Yakubowski absent.
The next item on the agenda is the presentation of the consent agenda. If I can have the floor computer again, please. The first item on the consent agenda this evening is the approval of the April 9th, 11th, and 23rd, 2019 board meeting minutes. The approval of the award of contracts to 3 vendors for delivered fuels: Feral Gas for propane gas, James River Solutions for unleaded 87 octane gas, Diesel Highway and Diesel Off-Road, and Corals Petroleum for number 2 heating oil. The third item is approval of contract modification for renewal to Logan Systems, Inc. for land and official records information system. This is an annual cost of $123,600 for 5 years, not to exceed $618,000 in the aggregate. Number 4 is the approval of contract modification for renewal Interstate Rescue, LLC for protective ensemble for structural firefighting turnout gear. This is the third renewal of a 4-year contract. Item 5 is the approval of mutual and automatic aid agreement for fire and EMS between Spotsylvania and Hanover counties. Number 6 is the approval of mutual automatic aid agreement for fire and EMS between Spotsylvania County and Caroline counties. Number 7, the approval of 6 contract modifications for renewal to multiple firms to provide professional engineering services. These are for Hazen and Sawyer, PC, Rummel, Klepper, and Call, LLP, Sullivan, Donahoe, and Ingalls, O'Brien and Gear Engineers, Black and Veatch, and Whitman and Reckwart and Associates. This is the third renewal on 4-year contracts. Number 8 is the budget adjustment and appropriation for additional fire rescue overtime costs. This is to increase the total expenditure adjustment of $1,183,951. Number 9 is the budget adjustment and appropriation to reflect increase in state and federal funding for child welfare line items. There's no local match. Number 10 is to approve a budget amendment and appropriation to reflect increase in mandatory expenditures in Children's Services Act line items. This is a mix of state and local funds. The net local impact is $966,000. Number 11 is the designation of authorized agents for grant application for federal fiscal year 2019 for the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program. There is no local match. And number 12 is the recommendation to appoint Michael Christie and Matthew Embry to Regional Preparedness Advisory Committee for Interoperability. This is for Region 2 Culpeper. And that, gentlemen, is your consent agenda for this evening.
Does anyone wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? Mr. Skinner.
Number 8, please.
Any others? Is there a motion on the remaining? Oh, we have to have public comment.
Yes, sir. It's public comment on the consent agenda.
Is anyone signed up for the public comment on consent agenda? Does anyone who did not sign up wish to speak regarding the consent agenda only? Seeing none.
Motion to approve, other than number 8.
there's no discussion, we can vote.
Six yes.
Do you want to address?
Yes, I'd like to address the one, it says we're going to set out and we're going to, is this for the coming year that we need, or is this for already used time? Chief, if you come up to the podium, just please.
That's right, that's for the current budget year. It would help to cover the current overages as well as what we expect over the remainder of this month and next month.
Let me ask you this. Is there a way to cut back on this if we went a full career fire?
The positions that have been approved already, we just essentially have to get them through the pipeline. So they have been approved. Most of those are in the current academy. So once they actually graduate, we will have 24/7 career staffing that the volunteers will continue to add additional capabilities on top of. So those positions are already approved. Our challenge is the amount of turnover we have and the gap from now until we get the people out of the academy, because there are a number of hours on nights and weekends that we are having to provide additional coverage that we had not expected.
Chief, I think you weren't here for the last few. You were on a trip or doing business.
That's right.
And I know Mr. McLaughlin and I talked about looking at, I think, half a year starting in January to fill these gaps and to make sure that, you know, this is quite a little bit of overtime, to be honest with you. And so I'd like to get together, and any other board member that'd like to get together. We need to figure out how we can cut this overtime down. Certainly. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So Chief, one of the questions that came up at the last, our last discussion is that why are the firefighters leaving? Or, is the attrition based on pay? Is it about, I understood it was pay and about potential long-term, where are we going to be in 5, 10, 15
Right.
years? And that was part of, I know the proposal between, the sheriff's office and the fire department about putting in a different type of pay structure.
Yes, sir.
And we presented that, and again, I think this kind of reinforces the need to move down that path. And I think we're working towards that, implementing that after the first of or looking at a potential implementation based on what the analysis shows.
That's correct, Mr. McLaughlin. We have a working group that's working on not only the compensation, but also some of the other issues that the chief has brought up.
So one of the things that we talked about last time was, I'd made a motion that we go ahead and allocate some of our reserve to a potential funding that effort after the first of the year is potentially to stem some of the loss. It didn't go before the budget, but I guess I'd like to bring that back up now. And I know we've got about $600,000 in back taxes coming here from the new solar project. Is there an opportunity that we could potentially, as a board, use that funding, not committing it, but at least reserving it for a potential pay plan improvement after the first of the year? Any comments or concerns with that?
I was just wondering if Mary or Bonnie had gotten anywhere with their looking into this pay plan and how far out you think we are.
The plan we have in place now is the working group just met for the first time yesterday. We have quite a bit of data gathering to do. We want to present to you an informed and data-driven recommendation. We have folks from county admin, finance, the sheriff's office, fire and rescue, and HR who are on that working group. And our time frame is gathering the data starting already through the mid part of June. Then we have an analysis and costing period, and then we have a recommendation period occurring in October with a recommendation to the board planned for the second meeting in November. So that's what our time frame is right now. I am very aware that the board or some board members are interested in any money that we can accumulate between now and the mid part of fiscal year 20. I have heard you all say that you're interested in putting that towards implementation of whatever recommendation comes forward that you all vote on and approve. So we're aware of that. We just have quite a bit of work to do to get there. And while I'm here, I do want to make sure that everybody on the board and the public is aware that the budget adjustment that's before you now, yes, some turnover does play into that, but this really started the increase in overtime last March when there were some additional stations staffed ALS, and also the provision of 24/7 career staffing ahead of those folks coming out of the academy. So this has been something that we've been trying to address all year, but it is not 100%, this is definitely not 100% related to turnover.
It's escalated because of the turnover. So it's escalated because of the turnover as that's continued. But the initial was some additional coverage that we needed to provide on the nights and weekends.
So understanding the timeline and all that, but I guess what I want to do is show a commitment to our public safety that we are moving towards that plan, part of that retention. And that's what I'm really looking to earmark some funds right now, just to show the board's commitment. And with that, I'd like to make that motion.
Mr. McLaughlin, if I understand, you're making the motion to earmark the 600,000
Yeah,
of rollback money?
True, the money,
From the S-Power?
Correct.
Special use permit?
yes.
That's going to be one-time money, correct, Bonnie?
Well,
That
that's
is
right.
one time.
That's right. This is really, we're looking at implementing the plan initially. Here's money set aside that at least shows that we'll be able to fund this potentially in that first half of 1 year. Maybe the plan might show we're going to do this 2 years or 3 years to implement the whole plan, but we do a half year in January. And I don't know if it's enough money. I just want to show that we got the commitment. We're at least starting to allocate funds towards that plan.
Tim, yes, I did that too, is we did, I looked at what it cost us per fireman, per deputy, and when they leave, once we train them and they leave a year later, we're stuck in the hole for $75,000, something of that. And when you look at the turnover that we've had here, and I believe it's because of, number one, they want to know when they come here, when they retire, what level they're going to retire at. So if, they want that step system in there. And that's the most important thing to say. If I commit myself to Spotsy's committed it to me till I can retire in the last 3 years, the highest paid. I think that's very, very important.
There's a
And
certain-
I think, and also being able to move up the ladder as far as seniority and stuff of that nature.
There's certainly a lot of factors into it. Those are some of them. It really comes down to just being competitive. I hate to call them our competitors, but we need to be competitive with the market that we're sharing.
I'm sure competitive does have a lot to do with it, but I've heard from a lot of people out there, people that fight the fires and the deputies and everything, is that I need to know what my future is. Okay? Because if we can show them that they do have a future here, then we can make the commitment to make sure it happens that way. The schools did it before. They found a little problem during economic times with the back, and that's what makes the teachers stay, that they can look out there and say, if I stay here for the next 10 years, here's my top 3 years. And this is what I can look at as far as my retirement pay. But we have got to, and I think kicking the can down the road is probably, we've got to stop it. We've got to fix it right now, because we're just, it's not right that we're using the public's money when we could do a more efficient job with less money.
I completely agree, and I can say that our first meeting that we had yesterday was very fruitful as far as a lot of conversation, a lot of ideas, and then also a lot of identification of data that we need to collect to be able to provide that entire picture to you moving forward. But I think we'll have a good product coming.
Well, the other thing, I think the firemen and the policemen and every deputies need to know that, at least I am, and I believe Mr. McLaughlin is committed to do this, okay? Because we appreciate what they do, and if you want the finest, you got to keep the finest, and that costs you some money. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Benton?
just last comment. Mr. McLaughlin, I don't know whether, I know you recommended that we take 1.2 million out of one of our funds and designate it.
I would just as soon do that, but
I'm fine with that, but on this pay, that's just what I wanted to reiterate to this board. I'm probably not going to be around. I know I'm not going to be around to do anything in the future, but this board has to be committed to it, along with all the other obligations we have on needs of the county and schools and everything else. If we're not going to commit to it, to put money into it and do a another Band-Aid fix for a temporary fix and not follow through each year doing the steps like whatever proposal we're going to get is not going to do any good. So if, I'm just a warning to the remaining board, just, may take some tax increase in the future to meet all of our needs. So, but I would support the 1.2 out of what fund did you, one of the funds, I can't remember what it's called, Stability Fund?
The Budget Stabilization Reserve.
That's it.
So that was in the last meeting, out of the Budget Stability Reserve, we were looking at taking the 1.2 or so to kick off or, as a reserve or, earmarking it for a potential future paid plan. With that, with the S-Power back tax, I think it's like 580,000, we could allocate that as well. So you can do both of the 580 plus 500 out of the budget stability if we want to balance it, but I think, Ben, do you have a choice? Why don't we take the 580,000 of back taxes that are due to the county, plus the 620,000 to make 1.2 million allocated towards a pay plan? I make that in the form of a motion.
What are the two sources of money? You got the S-Power money. What's the other one?
The other one's of the Budget Stability Reserve.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Yakubowski?
Thank you. And my apologies for being just a little bit late, but I think I got the gist of the conversation that's going on here. My opposition always arises from the fact that this is one-time money that we are committing to, which 1.2 million is roughly a penny on the tax rate, pretty close. So just let it be known that next year a penny on the tax rate will be needed to continue the funding for this. Not saying that it is not the right thing to do, but when we obligate ourselves, we're constantly taking that amount of money that we get every single year in new revenue, and before we even get to budget season, it's already spent. And I'm not against pay increase. I'm not against making sure that our first responders are, competitive and they want to stay here. But I think that we need to keep our eye on the bigger picture, which is the consistent and constant reduction of new revenues before we even get to the discussion of what to do with the new revenues. We've already spent the money. And I would reiterate also that this is why I think we need a very stringent strategic plan with 1, 3, and 5 year goals that we can stick to things like this. And like Mr. Benton said, once you do it, you need to keep doing it. We can't back out and say, well, we don't have the money this year. So it's more important to actually do it than to not do it. But I will be voting against it just simply because I don't think we should be taking money out of the Budget Stabilization Fund to pay for it. But it is a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Skinner?
Chief, one quick question. I asked it earlier. Okay, so we've got 1.18, almost $1.2 million of overtime. With the new students coming through and everything, can we expect a reduction of this overtime, and how much would you say? Because right now we're paying roughly 1.2 million of overtime, okay? And what we've asked to set aside is $1.2 million. So there's got to be a way that the overtime could pay for this if we can cut it down.
I will say that there is an increased amount in our overtime budget for next year over what this year's current budget was. I really can't give you a number at this point because I don't know what the staffing levels are going to be as far as how much turnover we're going to continue to have. We will no longer need to address short-term staffing needs or short notice staffing needs on nights and weekends, which is an ongoing problem right now. That will resolve itself at the end of July, beginning of August, once this academy graduates. But I can tell you beyond what we would have coming out of the academy, I have 16 vacancies currently that I'll need to fill in a school starting most likely in September.
Well, Chief, can you do this? Can you go ahead and give us what it's going to take so that we don't need this overtime? I mean, realistic, you should be able to say, okay, you got 13 positions short right now, you just said? Is that right?
Yeah, I just need to fill the positions. The positions are approved, I just need to be able to fill them.
So it's going to take, now, are you
just
going to
takes
fill
time to
those with
process it.
experienced people or new trainees?
If we can get qualified, experienced people, we're going to certainly hire those.
But if
Really, we look for who are the best people to bring on, who are people going to be able to serve the community in the way that we need to, and then we'll look at what qualifications they have. We may end up doing concurrent, simultaneous academies, really with any experienced personnel that we have, putting them through a portion while we're doing a longer academy for people without experience. It really just depends upon what the applicant pool is.
Okay, well, you know, that's the point you brought. Can we get experienced people? The only way we're going to get experienced people to come here is if our program shows them exactly what their future is here, what the pay is going to be in the future here too. So it's just one big, I don't know, it's a problem that we're going to throw into your hands. And please come back and tell us, because I think when we spend over $1 million in overtime, then we're not staffing properly. And you know, I know that the volunteers are doing what they can, and I certainly appreciate that.
And they're helping us out during the day as well, so.
Yeah,
when
I
they
realize
can,
that.
It helps with overtime, so.
Well, I'd like to see what it's going to take to cut the overtime down.
Yep.
I know there's going to be some overtime because we don't know
it's really
when people get sick or when people, you know.
Right, it's really identifying, basically coming up with that level of competitiveness, that whether it's the pay, other incentives, different things that we can do, and that's really that work of that committee that we now have functioning to identify what that solution is going to be. But the positions are in place. The positions are there. We just need the people to actually fill those, and it really does take a while to actually get people onboarded, and then through the academy, depending upon their level of training. But we are not attracting a significant number of people with prior experience. Sure. I can say that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bonnie, are we above where we need to be in the stability fund? Is this extra?
No, sir. For fiscal year 20, we just made it to the $5 million policy level. So no, this would take $620,000 from that.
I want to be able to implement this plan, but I do share the concerns that Mr. Yakubowski expressed. I think we need to make sure we're going to be able to keep the commitment before we make the commitment. Is there any further? Mr. Ross?
So, and I agree, I don't want to commit money that we don't have, but Bonnie, over time, without changing the tax rate at all, what have we seen in revenue increases to the county, or do you have a rough number off the top of your head that we?
The revenue increase is roughly $6 to $8 million per year.
Sure. So I think we have the money that will be there regardless. It's whether we want to commit this to it, and I believe that of all the things that we look at, this is something that has in the past always received the board's full support. So it'd be safe to say the money's going to be there based off the increase that we normally see in revenue without even a tax increase. However, we are committing ourselves to that, and we're committing a future board to that in a sense as well that might not want to spend it there.
In future fiscal years, fiscal year 21 and beyond, I would say yes, that's the case. At this point, we have already, this $1.2 million roughly that's being added to overtime for fiscal year 19 is coming from an added $2 million in real estate tax revenue this year, which was factored into the real estate revenue for fiscal year 20. So you have already, as part of the budget you adopted for fiscal year 20, used that.
So just to follow up, and I think everybody's saying the same thing, and all I want us to do is make the commitment that we're going to review this, and we allocated some funds against it. We're going to do the study, which actually falls in line with the budgeting process. So as we go forward, we're going to know what the actual cost is. We're going to know, hopefully the chief will have his new firefighters on, there'll be another class, and we might start seeing a reduction in overtime and actually start seeing some of the savings that'll be incorporated into the overall plan, the pay plan. So it may not be the full 3 or 4 million, it may be 2.5, but that part we don't know until you finish the study, until the numbers come in, and then, but I just want to show that potentially, if we show the commitment from the board, maybe we'll see less attrition from some of the firefighters and some of the deputies, and they'll actually be less impact and cost us less money in the long run. So that's why I'd like us to make this motion.
May I make a respectful suggestion to the board, please? Potentially, instead of using the $620,000 in budget stability reserve, you may want to consider using the $580,000 in rollback taxes from S-Power, and then making the motion that any available revenue at the end of the fiscal year be earmarked or designated for this purpose going forward to implement something January 2020.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, so how about I modify my motion that we use the $580,000 rollback taxes, any additional revenues, remaining revenues at the end of the fiscal year, we can apply towards a potential pay study improvement or pay plan improvement.
I'm much more comfortable with that.
Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion? We can vote.
Six yes, with Mr. Yakubowski voting no.
Thank you.
We still have to vote on number 8, yeah.
So after our discussion, I'll make a motion to approve number 8.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we can vote.
Seven yes.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to public presentations. Amy, do you have anybody signed up?
Yes. I'll read the guidelines for public presentations to the board. Public presentations are an opportunity for you to present matters you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up to speak at each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from you to the Board of Supervisors. They are not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the provided sign-up sheets, print clearly, come to the lectern when your name is called, clearly state your name and voting district for the record, address your comments directly to the board, state whether you are speaking on your own behalf, which you will have 3 minutes to speak, or on behalf of a group, you will have 5 minutes to speak. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks. Written comments are always welcome. The first speaker is Kevin O'Connor.
Good evening, Board. Kevin O'Connor, Cortland District. And I'm here to address the fire issue that's going on right now. And I'll put it in plain, simple English. I'll be more than happy to tell you why the firefighters are leaving. And I'm going to go back, I guess it was 5 Mondays ago. I called Spotsylvania for a tree down on Harrison Road. Sheriff's deputy showed up. Don't ask me what time it was, 11:15. I was watching hockey. And proceeded to leave. And that was the night that there was a fatality over on Courthouse Road. So meanwhile, the tree was still down between, I guess that was 11:30 and 4 o'clock when there was a 2-vehicle accident that wound up hitting the tree. I called 911 at that particular point. I was trying to get some sleep, which just wasn't happening. At one point, about 1 o'clock, when I heard the screech, I walked out, and there was actually a car that had hit the tree, but the car backed up and drove back in the opposite direction. So let's fast forward to 4:15, 4:30 in the morning when I actually called 911 because 2 cars hit it. Fire department showed up, and I'm going to tell you straight up, those boys were wore out. They were flat out wore out. So let me ask you a question. What are you going to do? You're losing mid-level personnel between 4 and 7 years of service. I got one Marine over here. That's the equivalent of losing your corporals and sergeants in the Marine Corps. So you're going to go someplace where you can get more money, and you're going to have 4 people on a truck. Let me ask you a question. Would you leave? Every single one of us is an employer. And I can verify that. I can ask the sheriff's deputy in the back how many times he's heard, I pay your salary each time he's pulled a resident over on a traffic stop. every single one of us is an employer. We need to take care of our people, and it basically comes down to money. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to 4 people. You don't even, the reason you're paying the overtime is because you're barely making 3 people on the truck. You start going into fire regs and all the other stuff, you should be having 4 people on there. So the other counties around here are soliciting firefighters over here, and they're paying them whatever it is, $5,000 or $10,000, and you're 20-something years of age. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna pack up and I'm gonna leave, or I'm gonna go get an additional $5,000 or $10,000, even if I have to drive an additional 30 minutes up 95 in order to get it. Let's go into the strategic plan. I have a few seconds left. I read the strategic plan, and then I looked at their fire numbers, and I'll tell you straight up, it's flat out scary. I challenge all the residents and everybody to look at the strategic plan and then look at the numbers and then tie everything in together. We got a problem, and it's emergency services. You need to take care of the fire department. Life or death situation. Thank you very much.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to speak at this time?
Something on the floor computer.
I'm Sean Fogarty from the Livingston District, representing concerned citizens of Spotsylvania County, a group, so I would appreciate the 5 minutes, please. On April 9th, this board approved S-Power's SUP for Site A on a vote of 5-2. Sites B and C were approved on April 11th. There are several thousand Spotsylvania County citizens represented by our group, all opposed to the project. I feel that the board's decision was outrageous, and the 5 supervisors will soon come to regret the impact on the county. However, my intent here is to begin the process of exposing the outrageous backroom deal that was dropped on all of us by the 5 supervisors who voted yes that evening. None of you took credit for the amendments to the protective conditions that you provided to Ms. Parrish. You all bravely chose to hide behind Wanda and let her try and defend the indefensible. My primary purpose is to attempt to provide some transparency behind this decision for Dr. Trampy and Mr. Ross's benefit, as well as the public's. I hope I haven't mischaracterized their comments to me and others, but they were as surprised as we were. Next slide, please. This slide was obtained from the county as a result of one of many FOIAs that we've conducted. It depicts, hopefully you can read it there, it depicts several text messages from S-Power's lobbyist attorney, Charlie Payne, to Mr. Yakubowski. On April 8th, the day before the vote on Site A, he lists S-Power's demands for conditions changes to include a new setback scheme, I've circled it there, burning of 50% of the debris, and several new decommissioning changes. The text does not include all of the shocking changes to the conditions that were revealed the next day on the 9th. We are still looking for documentation of those other demands. Next slide, please. This slide was presented by Ms. Parrish the next day at the hearing, and it includes precisely the demands made by Mr. Payne the previous day in his text. The other changes were depicted in other parts of her presentation. Some of them are listed here. There were several shocking changes in these final amendments. Allowing burning when the Planning Commission had recommended against it, and S-Power had already agreed to that condition. The staff report stated, it is important to note that the applicant did say to the Planning Commission that they would not object to the no burning condition. Additionally, as I recall, the fire chief had said that the pros and cons of burning versus mulching pretty much balanced out, and it made no difference to him. Yet it was included. There was a new setback scheme included that treats property owners differently based on the status of their site plan, whether or not a home was built, and where the home was on the lot. When asked, Ms. Parrish stated that the standard county procedure is to measure setbacks from the property line. This has never been done before. Finally, the irresponsible changes to the decommissioning conditions. Zero surety for the first 5 years and full coverage for county taxpayers not achieved until the 25th year. This had to be part of the last-minute deal because at the previous board meeting, Mr. Yakubowski had insisted on the full $36 million cash-bound bond for the county, but his position changed 180 degrees at this next meeting. Next slide, please. As evidenced by this excerpt from the county's SEF ordinance, the board's actions in improving this particular condition violates county code, which requires the applicant to provide a surety equivalent to the cost of removal of the SEF prior to issuance of a site plan permit. The board is not permitted to change an ordinance via an SUP condition, and in my opinion, this condition cannot be legally executed. So, S-Power proposed a $10.6 million decommissioning bond. The Planning Commission and staff approved a minimum of a $36 million cash bond or irrevocable letter of credit, with no credit for recycling. However, you, the 5 supervisors, approved zero bond for the first 5 years. You shifted tens of millions of dollars in liability from S-Power to the taxpayers. Whose interests are you representing? Speaking of negotiating, what did the county get for these shocking concessions to S-Power? That is the question that many citizens are asking, and none of the supervisors who voted for this have yet to reveal. Next slide. For Hammond, we'll use this on his time.
My name is Dave Hammond, Livingston District. This slide also shows a text that's, to me, is troubling. It's from Mr. Payne to Mr. Yakubowski on April 3rd. It states that if S-Power is granted just a corporate guarantee for the decommissioning, it could free up an additional $250,000 a year. It remains to be explained how this freed up cash will be spent or where. Of course, we're well aware of Mr. Creamer's unenforceable promise of $25 million to the county. Mr. Payne even said it was not specific to any project and could be used for any purpose, quote, over the life of the project. Several times he stood at this podium and relayed Mr. Creamer's offer to drop a pile of money on the county. The 5 of you may not see it that way, but most of the informed public does, especially with no visibility into the deal struck with S-Power in the closing week. There are a lot of questions that we're asking and have no answers to, such as, you know, when will the solar power for the schools be provided? What's the status of this fire station? When will Belmont Park be upgraded? When will road work begin? How does the $600,000 a year guarantee work? I mean, you calculate that out 40 years, that's only $9 million. Where's the other $16 million going to come from, and when? Mr. Creamer came to you offering $25 million for SUP approval, and you gave it. Now, you'll be going to Mr. Creamer with your hat in your hand, pleading for money, so you're not made to look like gullible fools. I'm sure you're hoping that they'll come out with an announcement soon. And you're burning up the phone lines trying to get an announcement made out. I also expect that once construction is completed, the promise will be forgotten, period. Your actions on April 9th to intentionally expose the county residents to unnecessary risks in order to save S-Power tens of millions of dollars was a stunning betrayal of the public trust. A total lack of transparency is exactly why citizens have such low opinion of government. I believe your legacy will be defined by your reckless decisions on April 9th. It may take a few years for the full harm to be realized, but by then it will be too late. We will always remember that Tim McLaughlin, Chris Yakubowski, Gary Skinner, Kevin Marshall, and Greg Benton sold us out and are personally responsible. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who did not sign up who wishes to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That brings us to board reports.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. One of the items I wanted to bring up this evening was our strategic plan. I know that we had finally, after some time, finally gotten together and put together a strategic plan that was more of a one-page summary of the goals that we, or the expectations of things that we wanted to try to get to. I think that it is time that we commit as a board to putting together a strategic plan with short-term and long-term goals. I voted against the item just before simply because of one-time money, not against the idea behind paying our public safety employees more and also having more of a structure of what they can expect in the future. But also, I think that it is important to make sure that all of our county employees and our school employees know that this board is committed to the ideas and the goals that we have put forward in our strategic plan, and that is to make Spotsylvania County the envy, basically, of the state in all that we do. And so I think that what we need to now do is put together some of those goals, get the input of board members, department directors, to make sure that we are on the path of getting to those ideals that we have put forward. I think that it is important also, not just for this budget coming up, but also for future budgets, because one of the things that we see, and I had said earlier, was that we do spend a lot of money outside the budget process, that when we then get to the budget process, the money's already spent. And so we need to make sure that when we are doing those types of things, that they are furthering the goals that we have all set forward or set forth together so that we can achieve those goals in the future. So I'm not sure exactly what that is going to look like, and I know I'm saying this as we're going into the summer and we get down to one meeting and we have vacations and other things that take up our time, and then we head right back into budget season. So I don't know about the timing of it. I'm not sure exactly if we wanted to put together a small committee perhaps to funnel some ideas together to start putting these ideas on paper. I know Fire and Rescue already has a strategic plan. I know the schools have a strategic plan. I know there's a water and sewer master plan. So there are plans that are out there of what we are anticipating. I think we need to bring them together and really have that as a guiding document that the board can use. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin.
No comment.
Mr. Ross.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Benton.
Got a couple things. It came to my attention that apparently our planning commissioners do not have county email. I was just was hoping for support to maybe push to get that our commissioners' county email, especially since they were FOIA'd this last time with the concerned citizens, and they have to go into their personal email accounts, and that has, this way the county can pull the emails. They don't have to worry about it. I think it's comes across a lot more transparent for our citizens instead of folks having, personal email accounts, and, they have, they're the ones that have to bring it forward. It's not the county having kind of control. That was my first. Mr. Chair, I'm hoping we can make some sort of decision this year about our either a new social services building or new building that we need in reference to, the space needs. I'd like for that to, us to make some sort of decision on that this year, whether we need it or not. And I guess, Mr. Cole, I was wanting to know, last time I heard anything was back in, I think, October about the line agreement between Orange and Spotsylvania. I was hoping we could have it completed
yeah.
this year.
Yeah, I think we're close. Had to go back and forth between staff and the county attorney's office a few times, but I think we're close to it now. And once staff gives us a thumbs up on it, then we'll share it with Orange and let their staff take a look at it. And once they're both groups are satisfied with it, we'll schedule it for each board meeting, Board of Supervisors, for their, to review it and hold a public hearing on it.
Do you have a timeline on that? Because that was, I thought we had things to Orange and they were.
We have been working with Orange throughout the process, and I think we finally got a final, or close to a final resolution to it. Once we're, I get the thumbs up from staff and everything in the county attorney's office on it, then we'll share it with our proposal with Orange, and they'll do the same. I would hope to be able to take it up maybe late summer, early fall.
Okay. I appreciate it. And Carl, I know you told me to be quiet on this, but I knew this was going to keep on coming up, and I'm going to speak in reference to the SUPs. Number one, I keep on hearing this thing about our citizens being informed. Informed by who? The concerned citizens? Because I think most of the stuff y'all brought forward was debunked and found false. The Freelance Star, they print an article saying they're against this, but they don't let us know that the publisher lives in Fawn Lake. Imagine that. You talk about transparency. We have a person that was employed by a petroleum company. Well, I'm about his age. I think he's got a couple years on me. And I can remember growing up as a little boy coming through the years, and I can't tell you how many times that company was involved in spills and environmental disasters, ecological disasters, but this gentleman still had his hand out for his paycheck. I guess he wasn't, maybe didn't have the back done to walk away when he sees the problems going on with that, but yet he wants to step forward about a solar panel sitting out in the middle of a field with rainwater running on it. As far as some of the abatements and stuff that keeps on being brought up and some of these things going on, we had a state senator that initially told us that he had no problems with it. It was a local problem or issue. And all of a sudden we find out that, this individual's voted for the 80% tax abatements. He's at least gone on legislation wanting to allow there for recycling, et cetera, like that. Well, we had legislation to go on that's been written and out there for recycling. So, we had all kinds of things to consider during this proposal and project that came before us. It wasn't willy-nilly, and we didn't, unlike some, I'm going to be careful, trying to be careful with my words here. Some maybe other political opponents that would, federal or state, that would be out there that would succumb to pressures of a minority, because there's 134,000 or plus in this county, and we've been touted that there's 4,000 that were against it. Well, there's a big number difference right there. And I saw many and got many calls and phone calls, at my home and on my cell, in reference to the support for this project. We had a group that goes out and attacks a little kid at his school, wanting to kick him out of one school because his father is using an address that puts him in that school that maybe he shouldn't be. but for childcare uses. They attack that gentleman that works at the Fawn Lake, personally attacks him. And then they want to tout and complain about how they're not being heard and why nobody's coming out in public and speaking up in support of this. I just find it very, very interesting how this all comes about, and then how we're, on their site now. I'm going to be in charge of S-Power security. They paid for a cruise that my wife and I saved up for over 2.5 years to take my family on, and crap like that. And you wonder why people don't want to come forward and talk and say anything. I know a good number of folks out in Fawn Lake that are everyday citizens. They work hard, they've earned their money, and they don't act like little entitled, spoiled brats. And they're not going to go around forcing me or anybody else, as far as my family, as far as changing the minds of, and all the man hours that I spent looking into this project, our engineers, our staff. It's not uncommon for a supervisor to try to get with a project that's proposed and try to protect the citizens and the environment and everything else during a project, to make sure that all aspects are covered and everything else. And then when you have the legislation on top of that comes and kind of hand ties us, certainly setting a precedent for us to have to go by. I'm sure they're not going to stop. I expect for every meeting now until S-Power's probably built out that we'll be hearing how atrocious our votes were. But I can tell the citizens out there that we spent many, many, many hours, our personal time, in reading all the plethora of documents that were supplied to us by all areas of this, the county, the company, and the concerned citizens. And we didn't take our decisions lightly. We voted for the best for the county and for the citizens. And, it's a shame that a Walmart can come in and have hardly nothing. But just because a small area of our county that touts that this has never been done, which was false, close to a residential area, that they're more important than anybody else, I guess. Anyway, I'm hoping we can put this to rest, and hoping in the long run we see the promises made come to fruition, and lay this to rest for once and for all. I look forward for it to get going and be done, and I guess I'll have to look forward for the next, at least my remaining months of my term, listening to how horrible we were and how little time and how we didn't listen to their great knowledge that they brought upon us. Although other engineers, and it's funny, I even had some school teachers talk about the cadmium telluride, and some of the concerned citizens, what they put forth. And you talk about Engineering 101 that was brought up one time. They said that gentleman should know that it's different. So without saying names and stuff like that, I look forward to y'all's continued comments, and you do your God-given right as our country allows, and you come. I'm sure we'll see you every meeting as we did before, and you can tout whatever you want to tout. But sorry, Carl, I just couldn't be quiet about it anymore. You're attacking some good men up here that have put their heart and soul into this community. We certainly don't do it for the money. It's a joke if somebody thinks so. And for somebody to accuse any of us of taking backroom monies or anything else, shame on you. Instead of threatening our elections and everything else, why don't you run for election? Step up, be the man and come forward, and then you deal with it. Have at it.
Mr. Marshall?
I just have one quick question for staff. Mr. Benton brought up earlier about the planning commission having county emails. Is that something we need to vote on, or can we just have staff go ahead and get that going?
Yeah, it's something that I've already got noted and we'll take care of.
Right, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Skinner?
One quick question following up is, so if we provide the computer form, are we going to provide the service form? Something we need to think about, because you know.
I'll get together with IS and see what we need to do.
Excuse me? Well, if you,
We weren't talking about giving them a computer, it's just an email address that they can log into.
and how are they going to log into it if they don't have
Well, if
a
they
computer?
don't have a computer, I mean, they.
Well, a
they
lot
might
of people, I know that they don't have the computer because they don't have the service hooked up. So, you know, to be honest with you, our planning commissioners do a hell of a job out there. Okay? They do a lot of work as hard as we do it on there. And for this county not to provide them the equipment and the service, I think is just, I mean, it's wrong. It opens up the citizens as far as a direct line to their planning commissioner and also to the email. So if you do that, Ed, please look into what it's going to cost, because there's different services in the different areas that we have. So I think what we need to do is follow through on this, and I'm in support of this 100%. The computers can't be that big of a deal to us. I really don't think. And the service, we provide them the service if they're going to, under the county, use it for county purposes.
You know,
Yes, sir.
I will say that I know, I believe at least one planning commissioner does not use email, period.
know.
So,
But that's because they don't have the capability. I mean,
I don't know about that, but, you know.
No, he's my planning commissioner, and he doesn't use email. I mean, he just doesn't. But,
well, I know my planning commissioner needs it. She doesn't have it, and she would use it, so.
I'll get with our IS staff and see what we can do.
What I recommend is this, you know, if the planning commissioner doesn't want it, that's their prerogative, absolutely. But if a planning commissioner does want it, then they should be able to use it and have it. That's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Ross?
just along that, I think we should think more about it. I mean, there's one thing in providing them an email address that they could access through OWA. There's another one if they don't have email service to their home, because I don't think the county does that for anybody that I'm aware of. And so that would be reached out. But I would say if they don't have one that goes to their home, I know I wish mine did use email. He's just old school and doesn't use email. So, but I think we're talking about two different things. One is an email address. That's pretty easy, I believe, Ed, which anybody could reach through OWA that already has access and is computer savvy and is going to use email. The other would be actually to provide them home access. Like you're talking about a home internet connection. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. And that I think we need to discuss more.
Chair. Just on that, that's all I was talking, just to be able to have the connection. I wasn't asking for provide computers or everything like that. I mean, we have the libraries and everything else, but I was just asking for the email address, a county email address. That's it.
Mr. Chair. So I think if they don't have home email access as it is, then they're not going to use a county email address either. It'd be like my appointed planning commissioner. So I just don't think we need to provide home access to internet connections.
For my board report, at our last meeting, we voted to direct staff to look into options for a multi-member social services administrative board. And this, I don't know if it was the wording of the resolution, but this seems to have caused some confusion among the existing advisory board. Several of them seem to have think we disbanded them. So a motion might not be necessary, but just so they understand it's the full board, I just wanted to move that the board would like the Social Services Advisory Commission to continue in their role until we make any final decisions on an administrative board.
I think that's a good plan. I think you're right, Mr. Chair. I mean, my appointee has come to me saying we're going to disband them, and that's not what's happening yet. And who knows how long it will take us to set up. We already have a Social Services Advisory Board, and it's been delegated to Mr. Cole. It was the county administrator. The Social Services Advisory Committee is still in effect and is going to be there until we make a change, which I don't think will be towards the end of the year, if at all. I mean, I hope it happens, but we're not moving. When's our next brief on that? In June?
Next brief will be May 28th.
May 20th,
That's your
okay.
next meeting.
But I don't know if you need a motion, but I would like to clarify that for the record. If maybe we send an email from staff to say you're not disbanded, you're still needed.
I'd recommend we direct.
We can certainly do that.
Doing the same thing they did before.
Ed, I don't need the email. I don't know.
I'll withdraw my motion. And that's all I had for my report.
The next item on the agenda this evening is presentations and reports by staff. Our first staff presentation, we have Mary Sorrell from Finance, Lori Newman from HR, and Lee Deskins, our health insurance advisor. This is a presentation on the options for the upcoming budget year.
Or computer, please. Thank you.
Board members.
Good evening, board members. In April, the April 11th board meeting, we had proposed several different options for the FY 2020 health insurance plan for the employees of the county. The board decided to vote for option number 1, and we are here to go into a little bit more detail about the option and what it's going to look like going forward. At the last meeting, the increase was adopted by the board to add an additional $750,000 to the existing $750,000 that we were going to adopt to take care of the county employees and fund the health insurance. So it's a total of $1.5 million that we were going to cost share away from the employee existing cost. We had seen a large increase in the Anthem total costing over the past several years. And I do believe that that was close to a $1.9 million increase. And so as a board, you had decided to incur $1.5 million of that cost. Just as information, we had not seen any cost increases passed on to the employees for the past 4 years. So us taking on some of the additional burden would lessen the cost for the employees the FY20 plan year. What we had decided to adopt were Key Care 20 and Key Care 30 existing plans that we had had in place for FY19. The plans will not change, so the coverages for the employees will stay the same. You will see in subsequent slides that the cost share per plan will stay the same for the county. We pay the same across the board, and the employee share will increase a little bit due to the additional Anthem cost passed on to the county. We also will be introducing a QHDHP, which is a qualified high deductible health plan, which will add a third option in addition to the Key Care 20 and the Key Care 30. And we'll go into a little bit more explanation of those. Now, we did provide a handout for everyone that kind of covers the cost share. So we're going to start with the Key Care 30 plan. You will see in this slide, we refer to ER is the employer cost, and the EE is the employee cost. In the first line, you'll see we have 4 different plans that we offer to each employee, and those are the same throughout each plan that we're going to offer. We've got the single employee plan, the employee with 1 child, the employee and a spouse, and the employee and family coverage. And you'll see that those are the same consistently throughout all 3 plans. On the next line is the split between the employer, what the county is going to take on cost-wise, and then what share percentage the employee will be paying. In the next line, we've got the employee cost per payroll, depending on the plan that they choose. These are the costs that the employee will pay per pay period. And then the following line, ER per payroll cost is what the county will pick up share-wise for that particular plan. The area in the yellow shows the slight increase that the employee will incur per payroll for each plan. And if you gentlemen have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Key Care 20, same table, same cost share split, employee cost, employer cost, and then the yellow shows the subsequent increase per payroll for the employee depending on what coverage they choose. The next slide is, oh, yes, sir.
Just to clarify one thing, if you take a look on the first Care 30, Key Care 30, and I'm just looking at difference in employees at the bottom line. So between the Key Care 20, and I'm just going to take the employee, because I'm sure it's the same on the line. So we're paying $307, they're paying $674, but if you go back to 30, they're paying $30.45 and we're paying $307. We pay the same pay. What is the difference? What is the main difference between 20 and 30 that the employee is paying 60 vice 34? What do they get for that extra $30, I guess?
There is a side-by-side handout that kind of goes into all the different explanations of what each plan has, but basically the Key Care 20 is a bit of a richer plan, so there are no, they have the co-payment, but there are no deductibles. The Key Care 30 has a deductible
Okay.
that the employee needs to satisfy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Now, we're adding a third option this year, which is a qualified high deductible health plan, or a QHDHP. The Q stands for qualified because not all plans are qualified by the IRS to encompass a health savings account. So ours is qualified, so we will incur, or we will allow a health savings account to be associated with our high deductible health plan. We'll go to a little bit of explanation, and Lee, if I miss anything, please don't hesitate to hop in here. So the high deductible health plan, it's got lower premiums for the employee, lower premiums for the employer, but the cost share is higher for the employee because there's a higher deductible that the employee will need to pay out of pocket, right from the beginning, whether it be prescriptions or health care. So many employers choose to assist in the funding of the HSA, and that's something that we're going to kind of show our recommendations in the next slide. Here again, similar table to the others. We as a county are going to incur the same cost per each individual plan. You will notice that the employee cost is much lower because the deductibles are much higher. And we've got some estimated costs that we're going to suggest to help fund the health savings account. So to make the plans more attractive, since this is a new plan for us and the education piece for employees is going to be pretty significant, we suggest to help with the out-of-pocket costs for the employee that we also add money as a county to the HSA account. And you can see the different splits. For the employee only, we're suggesting $100 a month or $1,200 a year. If the employee has one child, we are suggesting that we put $125 into the HSA. The employee spouse, $175 a month. The employee family, $200 a month. So you see it will add some money to the HSA, and it will help with the employee's out-of-pocket expenses should they incur any. Now, Mary did some extra investigating on her part with the school system, and she found that the Spotsylvania County Public Schools, for the first year of their health plan, which this is the same that they are offering to the schools, they're offering additional seed money. It's kind of like a sign-on bonus for the first year only, where the schools will actually give employees an additional $100 a month for just the 2020 plan year to help entice new employees to adopt this plan. Now then, the advantages to employees having the high deductible health plan. It is a lower cost for us, the employer. The premiums are much lower for the employee as well. And it also provides a third plan for employees to take advantage of, instead of just having the Key Care 20 and the Key Care 30. The HSA account, some of the pluses for employees is that the employers typically had help adding funding to the accounts. And employees can contribute additional funds depending on their age and the IRS guidelines. And all the money that is deposited into the HSA is tax deferred. And unlike an FSA, which we do have the flexible spending account available to employees, the HSA dollars are the employees, and they don't lose any dollars at the end of the year. And if they decide to leave us, that money is portable, so they take that with them. Now then, who should choose the high deductible health plan? Well, a lot of employees, if they're in good health, if they don't have high prescription costs that they need to fill on a monthly basis, if they have relatively low instances of going to the doctor, it's a great plan for them to have. It incurs less expense for them on a monthly basis, and they also can accrue funds in their HSA, which they will never lose. So they can use that money on until their 60s if they choose. If somebody has planned medical expenses, as an example, if somebody knows they're going to have knee surgery this year and they're going to hit their deductible, then much of the expenses, once they've hit their deductible, are covered 100%. There may be some additional cost based on prescriptions, but the majority of the costing after they've hit the deductible is picked up by Anthem. Now, I know we mentioned a little bit the tax advantages of the high deductible health plan. Again, any contributions to the HSA are 100% deductible depending on age and people's tax bracket. Any withdrawals that people take for medical expenses will not be taxed. These funds will accrue interest while they're in the HSA. And there are some plans that will allow you to actually invest those funds. So you get to a certain amount of money, and then they'll allow the employees to invest that so their money can grow even further within that health plan. And again, unlike the flexible spending accounts, the unused money remains in the HSA, which is with the flexible spending account, the maximum you can roll over to the following year is $500. So any money that an employee has put into an FSA, they would need to use, or they're going to lose it if it's over the $500 mark. So HSA, all the money is theirs, and there's no issue of losing the money at any point in time. Now, there are some disadvantages of this plan. Some people, if you're going to incur expenses on an ongoing basis, if you've got high prescription drug costs, or if you have health insurance needs that you need on a monthly basis, you may not want to choose this plan because it'd be a lot of out-of-pocket expense right in the get-go. And it might be better for someone to have the Key Care 20 or the Key Care 30 with a lower deductible, or just the copay share. Each employee's situation is going to be different, and they are going to have to assess it based on their individual needs. And what we're planning going forward into the open enrollment period is doing a pretty significant education piece for the high deductible health plan so people understand it, and then also offer people to come into the HR department, where we have several people that are very familiar with these plans, and Leah's offered to help as well, for people if they want to look at their individual situations and try to decide what plan might be best for them. What questions do you gentlemen have for us?
Anyone have questions or comments? Mr. Skinner?
So it sounds like to me, if you're a young person, young employee, and you're not going to hit the doctor very often, would you recommend that the high quality is the way to go on that one?
Absolutely.
Okay, but the problem I have with that too is you're putting, for an employee or the family, close to $175 a month
For the family.
for the family.
Yes.
And yet if you don't use it, you can only roll over 500 of that?
Oh, no, all of it.
Thing is yours.
Flexible spending doesn't get to roll over. HSA rolls over 100%.
It's their
Okay.
money. They keep
They
it.
don't lose it.
Oh, okay.
It's a different way of health insurance, a different way than most of us are used to. But it is going to be advantageous for some employees. And so we're fortunate that Lori and several other people in that staff are familiar with these plans. They can talk to employees about it. I've been stressing at all the staff meetings to directors, we need to talk to employees to take a good look at this because it is going to be beneficial to some people. It's different. It's different. And Lee can address more. Because they're going to be paying the full cost, right now we pay a copay for a prescription. Most of us have no idea how much that prescription really costs. When you go to purchase these, there may be some cash flow issues in the beginning because you'll be paying the full cost of a prescription. But if you do the math and consider what the county's contributing to the HSA and what you can contribute, there are limits, but you can also contribute yourself. So if you're saving money by going to this plan and you choose to put that back into the HSA yourself and you're within the limits, then you may actually be much better off with this plan. And because employees are more in tune to what they're spending, there is typically savings in the big picture.
So if you're also, let's say you're hospitalized for 2 weeks, very expensive. So are they covered in the beginning of the year? Let's say hospitalized, they got to put upfront probably the entire deductible.
Which is $3,000, so that would be one of those cases where if you were hospitalized in January, it would be bad timing. And that's where we think the seed money may help in the first year. If we were to give seed money in the beginning to help, I'm not necessarily suggesting we give the whole $1,200 in the beginning. We need to talk about how we seed that money, but cash flow is something we're going to have to talk about to employees. That is going to be a concern. But if you look at the whole picture for the full 12 months, there are employees who are going to be better off with this, even under those circumstances.
Okay.
But it is a very,
Lee has said
to me repeatedly, you can't talk about group health insurance and use the word fair in the sentence. It's not going to be necessarily the same or fair for everybody. Everybody's cases are individual and different, but I would really, really suggest that employees take a good look at this because could be advantageous to some.
And this would be renewable. I don't want to go out and try it 1 year and then all of a sudden, it didn't work that well. So, but it's up to the employee.
Yes.
Can switch it anytime in the year, not in the year, but every annual.
Annually.
Yeah,
Right.
and, right. Okay, so if they don't really like it, they can go to a different one.
Yes.
And we plan, yeah, we
Next year,
plan,
yes,
right.
sir.
But we do plan to offer this on a yearly basis, not
Yes,
switch out.
that is our plan.
Okay, thank you. That's all
Mr. Chair,
right.
just a quick one.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Is it a one-time capital or a maximum deductible for the year, or is it 3,000, let's say high deductible, 3,000 multiple times during the year?
No, it's
Calendar year.
calendar year.
3,000 the entire calendar year. Once you've paid it, that's it. So you break your leg and on 1 January you pay 3,000. Are your prescriptions then covered by the regular plan or what?
There are, go ahead.
Yeah, they're covered with co-payments, and so the maximum out of pocket would be $4,000, but for your medical,
Speaking to the mic so that people at home can hear you, please.
for your medical or hospital expenses, it's 100% after the deductible of $3,000, but for your prescription drugs, there are co-payments. And if those co-payments did add up to an additional $1,000, that would be $4,000, and you'd have 100% for the rest of the year.
So that includes doctor visits, everything else. The total that you could potentially pay is 4,000.
That's
As a
correct.
copay. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Marshall.
can I add to that as another question here with, once that $3,000 can be paid from that savings account, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a young man that's healthy, this is a pretty decent deal for them.
Oh, it's a great deal. It's a great deal for them.
And I got one other thing too. I'm a little disconcerted that the presentation that you all put together did not include the information for the retirees. It doesn't, you did provide a sheet that showed the retirees
Yes, they are.
and showed they have a larger increase. And it doesn't have the breakdown on percentages like the other previous charts do either. Can we get that for those
Yeah,
folks?
we
know?
don't track retiree insurance by percentage that way, so that's why we don't show the percentage on the sheet. We are talking about active open enrollment for the active employees at this point. You're right, the retirees will be impacted, and I think we talked about it a little bit during the budget presentation. The county will pay, as we always do, the full share of employee health insurance for the retiree on Key Care 30. If they choose to opt up to 20, they will pay the additional cost, because that is a premium plan. And they will pay the full cost difference to go to Key Care 30 if they want to sign on for employee child, employee spouse, or employee family. All those things will stay the same. But those costs absolutely will increase a bit. Yes, sir.
Right, can we make that public knowledge, the
Yes,
numbers
yes,
of the
yes.
increases for
Yeah.
these folks can see what they're gonna be increased? Because
Absolutely.
this presentation, it's on our county website.
Yes.
And we need to let those folks know how it's going to affect them also.
Yeah, we can add, Lori can probably post this to your website, this sheet here that has all the information on it, if that's.
Right, because, some of our retirees are on fixed incomes and different things, and some of these increases could drastically affect them. They need to let them know.
We'll get that on the website.
Thank you.
I just want to express support for your efforts to teach employees about the HSA and the high deductible plan. I think, as has been said, it's kind of the impression that, well, if you're young and healthy, this is good for you, which it is in most cases. But I think I've been studying healthcare financing for a few years, and I find it's also good for a lot of people who are not so young.
Right.
And so I encourage you to let the employees know, or encourage them to find out what's best for them. I know Mr. Braswell is really doing this on the school side and trying to educate their employees, so I appreciate that effort.
We've already talked about we're gonna get the communication pieces out to the employees many different ways. We're gonna have in-person meetings, we're gonna do webinars, we're gonna have one-on-one sessions. So we've already talked about the communication piece for this in the education.
Right. Any other comments? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to the next presentation by staff, and that is the extension of the incentives in the agreement between the EDA and the Knife Center LLC. Tom, can I interrupt you for a minute? Is your microphone on? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes. There we go. Yes and yes. Okay. The company is located on Ladland Drive in Supervisor Skinner's district, and the company owns the building, employs more than twice as many people as promised, pays well, and continues to grow. The company is an excellent corporate citizen and is involved in civic and charitable activities. And Edwin can present some slides with an overview.
Well, good evening. Thank you for your time. A couple slides. We'll be succinct, but we will be thorough. So if you have any questions, please just let me know. Again, our recommendation, the Spotsylvania Economic Development Authority is recommending that the Board of Supervisors approve a 5-year extension of incentives for Knife Center. Some background that Tom touched on, originally done in 2013. It was a 5-year program. Also written in at that time was the optional 5-year extension based on performance, which is what we're talking about this evening. That original 5-year term was approved by the Board of Supervisors. The ROI on the program was calculated based on the full 10-year program. In 2018, EDA reviewed the program and now recommending to the board the approval of the 5-year extension. Knife Center's provided exemplary reporting, great information to allow us to kind of do a proper review. We'll show you some numbers in just one second of how Knife Center has outperformed what the original agreement was asking for in order to receive those incentives. Knife Center did purchase the building that they're now in, and again, Knife Center sales have been sufficient to max out their B-pole reimbursement. So here are the numbers. We'll start with B-pole. For the first 5 years, there was a $50,000 cap. So that began, as you see, in 2015. And as you get to 2018, you'll see that the $9,852 was in the reimbursement, but they were over that 50,000 mark. So the 8,431 in green was good to the county over and above that 50,000. The benchmark for employment were 12 employees, and as you see, they've grown, started with 20, now to 32, and they are currently hiring additional employees, so we should see that number of 32 grow. Average annual salary, that was $40,000. That average salary has stayed at that mark, but as you can see, overall salaries paid are higher above the benchmark due to the fact that there are, in 2018, 20 more employees than at the benchmark. The real estate tax we included here, real estate tax was not in the original ROI calculation, but just to show what else has come into the county budget, that's the real estate tax that has been paid in addition. EDA always looking to, as we change membership, looking to ways to explore how we encourage investment, growth, create jobs, sustain revenue, and this is one of those programs. We've talked about, is there a structured framework that we can look at that might help us get started on these types of things, or is it each one comes in and we sit down and look at the needs of the county and the needs of that company? So just to get you an idea of the thought process behind how these are done. Based on the criteria of the original program, again, the EDA is recommending Board of Super approval of the extension.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Skinner?
Thank you. So, sir, you've had these employees, I don't know if you still got but that's okay. You've had 32 employees. Where is the point that you cannot hire any more employees because of the, you just manufacture? What are you growing? What can we expect?
We're a retailer, so,
so
we have 2 more building pads on the property, and we can very easily put up 2 more buildings, either one for office, warehouse, one as office, one as warehouse. So honestly, there's no reason we couldn't, be at 50 or 60 in another 5 years, just based on the evolution of our industry and as we grow into related industries and operate out of a central facility, because then you save across a lot of shared infrastructure bits. But there's no reason we can't do another warehouse and do another office building right on the property.
Okay. Thank you.
And that spreadsheet is back up on the computer if you need it.
I had one question. Because the original offer included the optional 5-year extension, that's the only reason I would be for this. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to extend an agreement once it reaches its end. And this is kind of an uncomfortable question, but are we sure that the idea was not, well, in case they don't reach the 50,000 cap in 5 years, we give them another 5? Are we sure that that was not the intent?
I don't recall that being the conversation at all. I think we knew what their gross sales were when they came, and we projected that it would be about 5 years worth of B-pole. So it's not surprising to anyone. There was no, sort of failure mode or something that if they don't perform, that they get 5 more years to perform. I don't think we had that conversation at all.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
So
McLaughlin.
one of the things I was going to kind of say, we as the board, and, Tom, you've done a great job of trying to grow economic, build our economic base. We want more commercial and industrial properties vice houses, because it's better revenue to pay for all the services that we keep giving away. And, but one of the things that, you know, struck me, we'd met with the mall, and a lot of the big box stores and stuff are struggling because, you know, that people are buying it online. So, you know, I kind of strikes me as that you are the guy that we want here, because you're not going out of business. You're going to stay here because you are that online business that's maybe hurting other people in other jurisdictions, which that's good for us. So, I mean, I encourage you to grow and keep growing, because I think that more businesses like that in the county are going to be benefit for us to replace the big box stores and that are going to go out of business eventually. So I appreciate it. So I'm definitely supportive of it. So.
There's Mr. Skinner.
And I want to back up what Mr. Trampy, Chairman Trampy said, and that is the original agreement that we had with you put the 5-year option in there. And that's what we want to make sure that industry understands. If there's a potential for that, let's do it. Let's not wait until after the 5 years, and you guys did it right, okay? Because we don't want people that we've given incentive for 5 years and that's it. Now they're going to come back to us and say, we want another 5. It's got to be in the initial contract, and that's what we look for when we approve the initial one, okay?
Yeah, Mr.
We've
Chair.
already done this a couple of times, and there's another case that we'll bring forward in a few weeks that's a little bit more complicated than this one.
So the one last thing, I think you kind of opened the door to, you had 2 additional pad sites for potential expansion. So I think that's kind of the thought here is this board is, you know, approves this option. So hopefully you can reinvest those savings back into growing those additional jobs and, you know, expanding our tax base here in the county. So that's what we'll look forward to.
That's our goal as well.
Great, thanks.
To address Mr. Skinner's piece on that, yes, it's got to be in the original piece, but here by rewarding them for outperforming, now we're re-incentivizing them to build the additional building, take what, remember, this 12-person benchmark was still for the whole 10 years, so now re-incentivizing them, so as they get through this now, as you mentioned, it's 50 employees, but you're exactly right. It needs to be, if it's going to be done that way, it's got to be done on the front end, not, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there any further discussion? If not, we can vote.
Seven yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chair, that brings us to the county administrator and the county attorney reports.
No report.
Mr. Chair, I have just a brief update on a couple of projects. Company 6, renovation and expansion. The design contract is in development and should come before the board later this month. The Judicial Center expansion, the pre-construction meeting was held today with the contractor. Initial work will begin in June of 2019 with the construction of the expansion starting in November, December. The project is anticipated to be completed in October of 2020. The historic courthouse stabilization, if you've noticed the courthouse, that project is almost complete. Staff will be presenting to the Historic Preservation Committee this week options to address the side door of the historic courthouse. Currently, the door has no means of egress, and staff is looking at various options for the side portico to create an exit point. And then finally, the Spotsylvania County Animal Shelter. The contractor has started the installation of curbing and subbase for the parking lot relocation, and they are continuing work on the stormwater infrastructure. And that's my report.
We have public hearings scheduled for 6:30. Is it worthwhile to begin closed session?
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is your resolution to adjourn the closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn a closed meeting for discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the county, specifically members of the Board of Supervisors, the position of county administrator, the interim county administrator, the position of the Director of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, the position of the Director of the Department of Human Resources, and a prospective transfer of an employee to the county, And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn the closed meeting for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically discussion of real property in the Lee Hill, Livingston, and Berkeley voting districts. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, specifically related to the opioid epidemic. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically relating to the zoning ordinance, land use matters, and traffic infractions. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3711A1, 3, 7, and 8, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
We can vote.
Seven yes.
In accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Benton? Aye. Mr. Marshall? Aye. Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to public presentations.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anyone who did not sign up to speak who wishes to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll close public presentations.
That brings us to public hearings. The first public hearing is R-19-0001, Thornburg Town Center. That's in the Berkeley district.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. May I have the floor, computer, please? Thank you. As noted, this is a request to rezone 10.27 acres from agricultural A2 to commercial C3. Please note that the subject parcels are currently split zone with a total of approximately 51.35 acres zone C3 and the remaining 10.27 acres zoned A2. The total acreage of all three parcels is approximately 61.62 acres. No proffers were offered with this proposal. Proffers would not serve to mitigate any negative impacts of future development, as all development must comply with the ordinance requirements. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on April the 17th, 2019, and voted 7-0 to recommend approval. Staff recommends the board adopt ordinance RO 19-0001, approving the rezoning, which will make the 10.27 acres consistent with the surrounding zoning and the comprehensive plan. The request consists of a portion of three parcels located on the south side of Mutt Tavern Road, Route 606, approximately 900 feet west of Interstate 95, and approximately 1,400 feet south of Mutt Tavern Road, Route 606. This area is outlined in red. Parcel 63A42 is approximately 48.72 acres, with approximately 8.65 acres to be rezoned. Parcel 63A43C is approximately 10.56 acres, with 0.83 acres to be rezoned. Parcel 63A44 is approximately 2.34 acres with 0.79 acres to be rezoned. You will notice that there is a small green square to the left of the subject parcels. This parcel here is split zoned. This parcel here is split zoned. However, it is not owned by the applicant and is not subject of this request tonight. As shown, the subject parcels are wooded and undeveloped. The surrounding parcels are also undeveloped and are intended for future commercial development. Here's the applicant's generalized development plan. The subject parcels have approximately 1,800 feet of frontage along the west side of Interstate 95 here, and approximately 1,500 feet of road frontage along the south side of Mutt Tavern Road, Route 606 here. The plan shows one point of access along on the Mutt Tavern Road here with this roundabout, which is which is within the proposal for the Mutt Tavern Road widening project, which is scheduled to be completed in 2022. The future transportation network will provide public road access at 3 locations, which will be determined and evaluated through the site plan review process. Development of the parcels will be in accordance with the ordinance requirements at the time of site plan review. Findings in favor: the portion of the 3 parcels that are the subject of this application are currently Zone A2 and are not consistent with the current zoning or the comprehensive plan future land use designations of commercial and employment center. The requested zoning of C3 will ensure that the subject parcels have consistent zoning with the adjacent parcels. Proffers would not serve to mitigate any negative impacts of future development due to the small area of the site being rezoned, which is 16% of the total 61.64 acres. There are no findings against this request. Recommendation: based on the findings in favor, which will make the 10.27 acres consistent with the surrounding zoning and the future land use designation in the comprehensive plan, staff recommends approval of R 19-0001. This concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the board? If not, does the applicant have a presentation?
Good evening. My name is Bill Vakos with the Vakos Companies, and I represent the applicant. 2 quick points. How we got here: this is a remnant cleanup rezoning, where when they established the zoning districts way back when, somebody didn't use the right highlighter. That's really what we believe. Second thing is, we are working very hard with the state and the county's economic development office to hopefully bring a big employment center opportunity to the county in this location. This zoning is a requirement for the business-ready sites that the state program has, so this is something also that we want to, it helps us score when the site is presented to opportunities out there. So just trying to clean this up, and thank you for your time. I have available for any questions if you have any.
Anything from the board? Not, we can open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to speak at this time on this subject? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Is there discussion? If not, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for repeal of County Ordinance Section 18-12, restriction on activities on highways, public roadways, and medians.
Good evening, Chairman Trampy, members of the board. Could I please have the floor computer? The ordinance at issue is Spotsylvania Code Section 1812. If you could take a minute to look at that. It restricts sales and solicitations on public roads and also medians on public roadways and highways. This is Virginia Code Section 46.2-931. It's the enabling statute which allowed the prior board to adopt Section 18-2, authorizes localities to regulate all types of solicitations. The problem we have with this statute, or with this code section 18-12, is the Fourth Circuit, which is our federal regional appellate court, found a excuse me, nearly identical ordinance unlawful. That's Henrico County's ordinance, which I will have a comparison slide up in just a moment. That ordinance was also enacted pursuant to Virginia Code Section 46.2-931, and it was a content-based restriction. They found that the solicitation ordinance was a content-based restriction, so strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of scrutiny that the court could apply, did apply in this case. With strict scrutiny, the government interest must be a compelling government interest and narrowly tailored and necessary, so it has to be the least restrictive means applying for achieving that interest. Henrico County's interest was traffic safety, which of course is a compelling interest, but unfortunately, Henrico County offered no evidence or offered little evidence to show that traffic safety would be improved by prosecuting any roadway solicitors who actually obstructed traffic. And they showed no prosecution statistics, no traffic safety statistics, nothing like that. So we don't have a whole lot of guidance as to whether any of those things would be helpful for our ordinance. So, and if you look here, the two ordinances are very similar. They bar basically the same conduct, distributing handbills, leaflets, literature, and also solicitation of contributions of any nature from occupants of motor vehicles. These are the people with the signs, help homeless, God bless, that are asking for money. And also the sale of merchandise, people with the pickup trucks or the bicycles and watermelons in the medians as well. Those are just some examples, but they prohibit the same, even though it's not worded exactly the same, they prohibit the same type of conduct.
And Jessica, part of the issue was we did look back to see if our ordinance was adopted with any evidence that was present that was not with Henrico County, and we weren't able to find any. So I think that it was a situation just like Henrico County where the board, adopted it because they understood that they were authorized to do so by the General Assembly, just like Henrico did. They didn't know at that time that there needed to be anything else, any more to it than that. So both ordinances are, in that way similar as well.
That's correct, and it can't be we found the data later. It has to be before. The data has to support it before the passage of the ordinance. Also, with this, the whole county was affected rather than just certain portions, the high risk areas, high risk of traffic, and again, their interest was traffic safety, which ours is as well. The high risk areas weren't targeted here. It was the entire county, which is basically the kitchen sink approach here. Again, further similarities, the countywide, and there's a need to show efforts to improve traffic safety by prosecuting those who actually obstruct traffic rather than just once there's a lawsuit saying, well, traffic safety is our reasoning, and kind of going retroactively and trying to invent the statistics after the fact. So our recommendation initially is to repeal County Code 18-12 since it has been in essence, struck down by the Fourth Circuit without that evidence, which we also don't have. Then what do we do after that? There are a couple of options, one being enacting a new county ordinance pursuant to 46.2-931. That's not something we recommend due to the minimal guidance from the Fourth Circuit. They did mention extra evidence and evidence that would they would have looked at, but they really didn't give guidance or state what they would have done had that evidence been provided. Also, there's no other binding precedent. There are cases all over the country about this issue, but it's really all over the place, and there's nothing else binding from our circuit or from actually the Virginia Supreme Court or Appellate Court. So we don't recommend being the test case with a new ordinance where legal liability could be assigned. Also, again, there was no evidence in Reynolds versus Middleton that Henrico County ever tried to improve traffic safety or prosecute any roadway solicitors who actually obstructed traffic. So what we recommend would be to enforce existing traffic laws that the Commonwealth has on the books. And I'm going to go through a couple of those for you. 46.2-926, that's part of the Virginia Code. That's pedestrians who step into the highway where they cannot be seen. This is all types of pedestrians. People who jaywalk across the median. This would be firemen with the boot who go out. It really cannot be just guided to one type of person, so it's strictly for highway safety. We don't want firemen getting run over. We don't want little cheerleaders getting run over with their bake sale or their car washes. We don't want people who are cutting across from the McDonald's to get run over. So it's purely a traffic safety issue. This is punished as a traffic infraction rather than a misdemeanor by the Commonwealth. Then there's 46.2-928. That's pedestrians not to use the roadway except when necessary, and the necessity to keep to the left. There's a difference between highway and roadway, actually. The highway means the entire width between the boundary lanes, and a roadway is a portion of the highway that's improved or designed or ordinarily used for vehicular travel exclusive of the shoulder. So these two are very different things. And then we have loitering on bridges or highway rights-of-way. This requires that signs be posted, which I'm going to get into a little bit. And what that will entail is Mr. Morgan from our planning department doing a permit with the board's, I guess, guidance. And the recommendation would be to place that in our high traffic incident areas. I'll get into that a little bit more. It's punished the same way as 1812, the section that we're recommending repealing. It's punished as a traffic infraction. And Section 46.2-930 has, as far as loitering, has been upheld by the Fourth Circuit. It isn't for protesting and other types of activities that are purposeful. This section does not prohibit that. However, as far as loitering and signs and people who are actually loitering, which is to stand idly by, that in Lytle versus Doyle was found to be, that was upheld by the Fourth Circuit. And basically what needs to be done is that signs need to be posted in the areas of the county which are the highest incidences of, which have the highest incidence of traffic crashes. And these aren't just pedestrian areas or areas in which pedestrians are stepping out in the roadway and getting run over or hit or causing crashes. These are all areas of traffic crashes, because we certainly don't want loiterers to cause additional distractions, which could cause additional crashes. So again, our recommendation would be to repeal County Code 1812 and implement no loitering signs in the county's most dangerous traffic areas. And to do that, we would ask that you authorize Mr. Morgan to submit a location plan and assign areas in which, assign sign areas. VDOT reviews for compliance, reviews the application for compliance, and a field review is done at VDOT. The permit is done and processed through VDOT, and actually the final approval is done through the commissioner of VDOT. And the sign form actually looks like this, and the signs would say no loitering. And through, by,
Mr. Chair?
go ahead.
So really quick, is that a board action that needs to be done, or it's not?
No, I was just going to clarify
Okay.
that when she was at a stopping point. My understanding is that there is no board action required with respect to the signs. That's
Okay.
something that Doug can undertake himself, and that's requesting the approval from VDOT to put the signs in place, and then they will be enforced by the sheriff's
Roger.
office.
I mean, we can. It's something that I think many of us want to do, but I think he's already working on it, I believe.
Yeah, I think it'd be wise just to go ahead and let him continue on with what he's doing. That's what would be my recommendation.
Mr. Skinner?
I'd like to look at that list, because I think everybody in their own district has those certain areas that really we see the panhandlers doing. So either have Doug call us individually, and we'll go through the area where they're doing it and make sure that they get put on it.
Right, we'll make sure Doug is aware to get in touch with you all. But I would note, the idea here and our recommendation is, and what our guidance is recommending, is that we're not targeting areas, with panhandlers. What we're doing is we're targeting intersections that are unsafe. So whether there's a panhandler there or not, it doesn't matter. Whether it's a panhandler or any other pedestrian, we're not targeting panhandlers. What we're doing is we're addressing unsafe intersections where pedestrians being in those areas would cause a hazard. So it's more of the identifying the intersection more so than an issue with a specific speech like a panhandler being there.
I understand. Thank you.
We'll certainly pass that along to Doug to make sure that he gets in touch with you to go over those intersections in your various districts.
Thank you.
And as far as the wording on the sign, it would say no loitering. If it were to say no soliciting, remember when I was talking about the scrutiny, the strict scrutiny, and that being the highest level of scrutiny? In essence, if strict scrutiny applies, it's like it's per se unconstitutional. So you're kind of starting at the highest level, and you're pretty much defeated before you even begin. So if we put no soliciting on this, it would be.
Right, but the loitering, it's
Yes.
content neutral.
That's
It doesn't
correct.
have anything to do with your speech or why you're somewhere. It's if you're just there hanging out, you're loitering. It doesn't matter why you're hanging out. But if you are there loitering, without any purpose, then you'd be able to be cited, under this enforcement.
And a lower level of scrutiny applies, so it's not again, it's content neutral. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions or comments from the board? We'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address the subject? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Skinner?
I'd like to make a motion to repeal County Code 18-12.
Is there discussion? If not, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that brings you to new business. The next Board of Supervisors meeting is May 28th at 6 p.m.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Gotta vote on that nowadays.
Seven yes.